Welcome back to the channel, guys. It's Kev from the gym. Right, it's the morning after the night before Fabio Wardley versus Daniel Dubois. We're going to have a very quick recap. I'm going to try and keep it under 5 minutes because I've got to head to the gym. Right, firstly, Daniel Dubois, I'm so proud of you. Super proud of Daniel Dubois, not just because of the fight in the ring and the performance in ring, but for a lot of the reasons outside of the ring, a lot of the things outside of the ring. Firstly, let's just say this. During fight week, I've got to commend Daniel Dubois because he seemed to just be protecting his peace. You know, he didn't engage a lot with the media. He didn't engage a lot with the sort of the interviewers and the commentaries and all that sort of stuff, where they played a lot on narrative about him being not all the way up there mentally, or not sharp mentally, or being airy fairy, or just being in his own world or whatever. And he was just ready to fight. He was agitated, ready to go. Um, he was walking out of interviews, cutting them short, being abrupt. And you know what? Fair play to him. For someone who's always getting criticized about not being this and not being that, he didn't feed into it. He wasn't bothered about it. He just, look, I'm ready to fight. I'm ready to fight, and everything else is not important to me. And so I respect him for that. I'm proud of him for being headstrong in that way, ignoring the narrative and just focusing on the job. And he got the job done. So yeah, big respect to him. Now moving on to actually the fight and how the fight sort of played out. To me, Daniel Dubois was the favourite. I did sort of say that, but I did say you can't rule out Fabio Wardley. I did think that it'd probably be Daniel Dubois early and then maybe Fabio Wardley late, but really the difference was the basic fundamental skills that Daniel Dubois has. And obviously I'm a boxing coach, professional and amateur, so I understand the amateur system and the professional system. I'm not the biggest advocate of the amateur system being super necessary. But I have said that when you have got a good amateur background and a good amateur pedigree, it's not the be all and end all, but it can make a difference in fights like this. It can get you out of trouble, and it can make some fights a bit more comfortable. And he basically won that fight based on his jab. I said in my previous video, he's got the best jab in the heavyweight boxing. It's like a backhand, super jab, super double jab, but also his footwork, just in and out with his feet, gliding into range, gliding out of range. And that's basically all he needed to do for the fight. And I'll be honest, outside of the two knockdowns, it was a fairly comfortable win for Daniel Dubois. I think he won every moment of that fight other than the two knockdowns. And I've got to give credit to Andy C in my comments, who basically said that it's a straightforward fight for Dubois. We made him a pretty strong favourite, and he's probably, I had Dubois as a favourite, many people did, but you wouldn't say he's a very strong favourite. So fair play to Andy C, he kind of called it as, Dubois with his skill set should have a fairly easy job. And he did. Fabio Wardley was looping the right hand, sort of around the side, bit of like an overhand. He wasn't shooting it straight. And you'd think with Daniel Dubois, sometimes his elbows are a bit out here, you'd think he'd go for the straight shots down the pipe. Fabio Wardley didn't once make that adjustment. And maybe because he had success in the first round and the third round, looping the right hand, sort of getting the tempo of Daniel Dubois, he just didn't adjust it. But Daniel Dubois started rolling underneath it. And so he made the adjustment, which was good. Fabio Wardley didn't really even try and bring the uppercuts into play. He landed one in the 8th or 9th round, which was a very good shot, to be fair. But other than that, I just think he needed more variation on his right hand. He couldn't jab with Daniel Dubois. It's as simple as that. He couldn't jab with Daniel Dubois, but he should have done better with his straight shots. He didn't really even jab to the body, try and slow that footwork of Daniel Dubois. But again, when Daniel Dubois is in and out of range like that, with the basic England boxing fundamentals, it was hard for Fabio Wardley to really to do anything. So just from a recap point of view, great performance from Daniel Dubois. They have both got great chins. Oh my goodness, both of them granite chins. Fabio Wardley, because he took a beating for more or less 11 rounds, definitely sort of 9-10 rounds, he took a bad beating. And he didn't get dropped, so his chin obviously granite. But Daniel Dubois also, the two shots that dropped him were temple shots. They'll scramble your brain. Anyone can get dropped with those kind of shots. But he took 1 or 2 shots flush on the chin, like the uppercut I mentioned in the 8th or 9th round. Big shot, and he was fine. So these two fighters, I said it at my previous video, 2 of the best chins in heavyweight boxing. and I think the fight cemented that. But Daniel Dubois, his amateur pedigree won him that fight, and he's got a good boxing IQ because he said it at the in the ring post fight. He did say, "Look, I had to use my basic skills." Don Charles said in the post fight interview as well that it was just box like an amateur and win the fight. You know, use your jab, use your footwork, in and out, straight shots. That's all he needed. He did work the body a little bit when he got inside, but it was very, very basic boxing. And Fabio Wardley didn't have the answers, which is a shame. But it's boxing. Now we move on to honourable mentions for the card. Zach Chelli, what a great story. Underdog and won by KO. So, you know, credit to Zach Chelli. I was around him in the amateurs when I was boxing, to be fair. And he's him and his dad. I love him and his dad because his dad, a lot of dads in boxing, they're almost annoying, like too involved. And his dad is very involved, obviously, as his coach. But even from the amateurs, his dad, to be fair, has always believed in him. I remember when he had like a good couple of fights with Ben Whitaker in the amateurs, maybe 3 or 4 like round robin fights, always in the national quarterfinals, semi-finals, or whatever. And you'd hear his dad screaming and screaming and screaming. But like his dad has always shouted for big fights for Zach Chelli. Whenever there's a pull out or someone's cancelled, he's always on the phone and he's shouting, "I want my son to get the shot. Give my son the shot. Give my son the shot." So credit to Zach Chelli. You know, fingers crossed off the back of this, he changes his life and he has a big fight. And he goes fourth. So honourable mention to him. Jack Rafferty as well, good performance. Now we move on slightly. Dishonourable mentions. Maybe a bit harsh, I'm not going to say dishonourable mentions, but look, what are some of the bad spots maybe that we can talk about from the fight card? You'll see in the title, the Ben Davison era is over. Now, that isn't my opinion, I'm not saying that, but Derek Chisora did say that in a post-fight interview. He said the Ben Davison era is over. And Ben Davison gets a lot of stick from coaches on the circuit. Again, myself, amateur coach and professional coach. I see it, I hear it, I know the noise. He gets a lot of stick. And the reason being is because the perception is that he's just a young coach. He's kind of come out of nowhere, got given the Tyson Fury gig and Billy Joe Saunders gig, made a lot of money, built his own gym. And now what happens is a lot of the good amateurs that you'll build up, once they turn pro, they'll leave you and go to Ben Davison. And that happens, you know, happened with Moz Hitama, even though he's still close with the Chatham amateur coaches. But it happens a lot, you know, a lot of these amateur standouts, national champions, multinational champions, once they look to turn over, they might go to spar at Ben Davison's gym, like what they see, like the sort of new techniques, and then they turn over with him. And then, so a lot of amateur coaches in the circuit, they have a bit of a gripe towards him before that. And I understand it, I get it. And a lot of the professional coaches, like the Don Charleses and the guys who've been around for a long time, again, you see a young coach come up, he's kind of usurped everyone and he's become a coach of the year a couple of times. So yeah, I get the gripe. However, I will say this, Ben Davison, I've heard him give very good advice in fights that have changed fights, 100%, I will say that. And pre-fight advice as well, that's changed fights. But on the flip side, I've also heard him give very complicated advice, which has been, in my view, too complicated in that moment, which has not gone well for his fighter. One example is Anthony Joshua. He was on Bambi legs against Daniel Dubois for 5 rounds, and really what he needed to do was get his hands tight, get your base, catch the jab. And they were telling him, Ben Davis in the corner was, in my view, a bit too complex in the moment because he was hurt. They was telling him slip the jab, throw the right uppercut and go off that. And it was just, sometimes your fundamentals and your basics is what you need. Fabio Wardley in this fight, he couldn't deal with the jab. And we know Fabio Wardley fights with his hand down, but I think there needed to be a bit more of an adjustment, basic adjustments about getting your hands tighter, try and catch the jab. Just the basics like that. So, but yeah, Derek Chisora says the Ben Davison's era is over. I don't know about that. I still think he's a good coach, but I just think sometimes it can be a little bit too complex unnecessarily. So that's that. Where do we go from here? Well, Fabio Wardley took a lot of punishment in that fight, so we've got to see how he comes back. We've seen it with other fighters before, like Joe Joyce, for instance. Take a lot of punishment, they come back and they're just maybe not the same. What I will say lastly is that the fight should have been stopped a couple of rounds early, I think. Not by the referee. only because the referee could only stop it when there's a flurry. And from Daniel Dubois' point, there wasn't really much of a flurry for him to get involved and stop the fight. It was single shots hurting Fabio Wardley, but then Daniel Dubois would sort of smother his work and get on top of him. And so the ref can't really jump in there. And I get that. And Howard Foster, I've criticised him a lot because he jumps in too early sometimes. But in this fight, I understand it. I don't think he was at fault. But I do think the corner should have stopped that fight a couple of rounds earlier. There was moments in that fight where Wardley's legs were gone. I think at the end of round 8 or round 9, he got up off the stool and the ref walked him to the doctor and his legs were all over the place. The corner should have thrown in the towel 2 or 3 rounds earlier. Howard Foster, the referee, you know, he done as much as he could do, in my opinion. And as I say, I criticise him a lot, but in this case, I do defend him. I think he done all he could do. He took Fabio Wardley to the corner, to the doctor's corner a few times, had him checked by the doctor. But there just wasn't a flurry from Daniel Dubois in order for Howard Foster to jump in. He'd land 1 or 2 big shots and then he'd sort of jump on top of Wardley, smother his own work. And in my view, that was actually a good tactic because it kept Daniel Dubois safe. Because what you want to do with Wardley, and Daniel Dubois done this perfectly, is he was out of range with a jab and the straight shots on his footwork. He'd land a big shot. That Wardley will get pushed back on the ropes, and then Daniel Dubois would sort of fall in, put his weight on him, hold the ropes behind him, and then wait for the ref to break them up. And I thought that was all right, because what you don't want to do is be in that mid-range where you've got him hurt and then you're now pressing the action, but then you've given him a space to counterpunch. Now, Wardley, we've seen he's dangerous at all times. So what you want to be is be a little bit far out where you can box him and he can't deal with your straight shots. Or once you've got him hurt, get all the way in close. And then, yeah, let the ref break up or smother it or whatever. But you know that basically you're out of range. You're either 2 out or 2 in for Wardley to land any kind of shot on you. So it did mean that instead of getting a stoppage in the 7th or 8th or 9th, it went longer. So Daniel Dubois definitely could have stopped him earlier, but Wardley would have been dangerous if you gave him that space. So I'm not mad at the fact that he was sort of smothering his own work after he had Wardley hurt and he was sort of falling in. I'm not mad at that, because I think it just made the win a bit more convincing, kept him out of danger completely. So I get it. But the corner, Ben Davison, Hodges, I forgot his first name, excuse me, Mr. Hodges, Lee Wiley, them guys there, good coaches, but they should have threw the towel in, I think. A lot of the consensus online is the same. Shane McGuigan said similar. And this is the thing, when you've got a reputation as being a puncher like Wardley and you can pull out of the bag at all times and all that, then, you know, maybe things go on longer than it probably should. So, listen, Daniel Dubois, Don Charles, the whole team, congrats to you. Super proud of Daniel Dubois. He is absolutely the number 2 heavyweight in the world after Usyk. Kabiao, number 3 for me. Where do we go from here? Daniel Dubois, Itauma. I think they'd both take that fight. But I don't think Frank Warren would make that fight. I think you keep them going on separate planes, which is fair enough. Wardley, big rest. He needs a big rest. Come back. He's got a couple of good options. The rematch against Joe Parker is probably fair because that fight was stopped quite early. So I feel as Joe Parker, I'd fancy that. But we got to see how Wardley comes back. As I say, he took a lot of damage in that fight. So listen, I've gone well over time, but that was Kev from the gym. If you like the video, please like the video. Please comment, please subscribe, please share. Appreciate all the interaction that we get on these videos. But yeah, what a time for boxing, man. Super card, super fight, and just just big up boxing, big up all the boxers. And Wardley and Dubois, two great men. So respect to them. Kev from the gym, out. Peace.